everyone, and welcome back to PopCultX, your go-to for all things pop culture from our Gen X point of view. Along with Gabriel, I am Danny, and today our panelists we have with us are, of course, Jack Foster and Adrian Quintero. Welcome back to the show, you guys. Thanks for joining us. And today, as we're recording this, it is October 1st. So we are moving into the quote unquote spooky season, if you will, where, at least for me, I love watching, maybe I like condensing all my horror films into 1 month. I don't know, just to get them over with, to get them watch them, because it has that same vibe. The air is starting to turn a little bit crisper and colder. So it's the perfect time for it. You can light up your candles. You can, enjoy a pumpkin latte if that's what you're in for. But it's fall is my favorite time of the year. So I'm really happy to talk about these spooky shows for this whole month that we're going to talk about. But tonight, it's also exciting because we're going to talk about scary ghost stories or ghost encounters that maybe we've had personally. I know I've had a few. Whether or not I believe it, because I'm still a skeptic, is to be determined. But let's start right in from you guys. Who wants to go first? Any sort of encounter, paranormal experience you guys might have had that you can share with us? And it will be Gabe.
Yeah.
Gabe said he was eager.
I've been so excited. Yeah, I've been so excited to hear about everyone's ghost stories. I didn't want to jump in, but I have a very family like related ghost story. This is like a ghost story that I've been like raised on. It didn't actually happen to me. It happened to my family before I was born, but it's like it's like an infamous part of our family history. And so I'll go ahead and share it with you guys tonight.
I think I know this.
Yeah. So my parents were recently married, and they purchased a new home in the historic University of Arizona area of Tucson, Arizona, and really nice home. Excited to get their first home together. My sister was a young child. Like I said, I hadn't been born yet. And they moved in. My mom was there, kind of unboxing everything and moving into the house. My dad had to go away for business, as dads often have to do, and left my mom alone with my sister. And weird things started happening in the house, like doors starting to open on their own. Just kind of like weird kind of things happening, like, okay, I thought I closed that door, or I left that door open. That's kind of weird. But then it started sort of amping up and kind of getting more and more frequent, to where it actually started, these doors and closets were just like kind of opening and closing on their own, to the point where my mom started getting really freaked out. Being home alone with her young child, like really freaked out young woman, called my grandmother up, said, what should I do? Like, these closet doors are opening up by themselves. Like, I don't know what to do. So she said to get a cross and put a cross on the door, and sort of like bless the house, or like say a little prayer. So of course, my mom, being Latina, she had a cross, of course, in the house, and got the crucifix, put it on the closet door. The closet door stopped, moving, and my mom said a little prayer, like it stopped. But my mom was so freaked out, she immediately like got my little sister, packed up all their stuff for like a little weekend, getaway, and went and stayed with my grandmother. It was so bad and so scary for my mom that she refused to go back to the house, and my dad had to come back. This literally is like the same month that they bought the house, and my dad had to pack up all the stuff and sell the house because my
Oh,
mom
wow.
refused to go back in the house, and she never went back. My dad claims that he went into the attic and found a framed picture of a small child just like in the middle of the attic, and thought that that was really weird. Kind of claims that, like, maybe it's connected, maybe not. He doesn't really know what's going on. He wasn't there when all of this stuff was going on, but like I said, my mom refused to ever go back into the house. And so I sort of grew up hearing this story. Later on in life, I went to go visit the house just because I was really curious. It looks like a totally normal, like beautiful house. Like it's very unassuming. It doesn't look spooky. It's not like, it doesn't have like evil things going out of the windows or whatever. But I wanted to knock on the door and talk to the new owners or the owners that have lived there and let them know like, hey, like my mom swears that this house is haunted. Like, have you guys ever encountered anything? But of course I didn't because I knew that I would come off like a crazy person. But uh, that was just one of the scary stories that like I grew up listening to or when my parents would like discuss it. And so it's sort of like our own little paranormal activity, except with my family.
Nice.
So
Sounds just like the Poltergeist movie, moving into a new house and
it was very like 70s time. I was born in 77, so this was like, in that era, that
Mhm.
time period. And just felt bad for my mom because I like just imagine her being a young mom with like her young daughter and freaking out and like not knowing what to do and calling my grandmother and saying like our house is flipping out. Like there's like, I don't know what's going on, if it's ghosts, if it's demons, if it's like witchcraft or whatnot. But apparently the crucifix stopped it for that night and she got the hell out of there.
Okay. That's interesting. Interesting. Jack or Adrian, you guys have anything not to top Gabe, but just to share?
Yeah, I can share mine. I got a few, but there was one night, right here in this corner that I'm sitting in was a record station. Like I had a shelf and I had a little record player. And I DJ'd for about 12 years. So I had my whole setup right here in this area. And my son at the time, who's 15 now, he was probably like 3.5, 4 years old. He would always sit on the little rug that I had by the record player, and he'd sit and I'd practice and he'd just listen and play with his toys and stuff like that. And so he's playing on this, it was a 4x4 IKEA shelf, just the cubes IKEA shelf. And we had I didn't have that many records to fill up the whole shelf. So we had some of my statues or action figures or something taking up space. And so he's down playing with this little Hot Wheels car while I'm doing that. We have dinner. We sit down. He's already in bed later that night. Here, I'm going to grab this real quick. So on that shelf, I have this, and it's 19. I can't read that. It's like tiny on tiny, and it's original. It's probably 1980, 1979, something like that. Mm-hmm. Radio controlled, big D cell batteries go in this thing right here, and his head turns with the remote. I don't have the remote anymore. And there's always a sound that is recognizable when you force R2's head. Can y'all hear that? There's this clicking noise. I don't know if you can hear that. There's a clicking noise, right? And it's hard to do. You can't it doesn't just spin. You've got to put some pressure in it and turn it. And so my wife and I were sitting in the other room right over here, and we're watching TV or something. And I hear this click, 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 click. And she was like, what was that? And I was like, oh, I know exactly what that noise is. I heard it all my life. And this thing has been with me my whole life. And I was like, that was R2's head turning. And she was like, why is R2 heads turning over there? I was like, I don't know. It doesn't have batteries. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for decades. And so I go over here and I get up from the couch, and I'm more eager to find out and come right to the spot and find R2 and pick it up, And that's what I was saying earlier when we were talking before. I said that none of my situations where I've experienced something kind of spooky or haunted, that I've always, you always think you're going to be really scared or terrified, and then you end up or I end up actually being really brave and not really bothered by any of it. And it's really strange to me. And I feel like it's one of my little superhero, just one of my powers, that like scary stuff really doesn't scare. I'm more scared of the movies that I'm watching on the TV than I am the real life stuff that I'm actually experiencing. So, I come over here, it's ice cold, and it's just that ice cold feeling, a different temperature than where I was over there on the couch watching TV. And I come over here and I could just feel a pocket of cold air. And I pick up R2, and then right between his legs, right here, or his feet, or whatever they are, is the Hot Wheel my son was playing with. And like it had rolled past and deeper into the shelf. And I was like, oh. And I had recently just lost, like around the birth of my son, I lost one of my best friends, John Bearclaw, and I also lost my grandmother as well. Very short into those are two people that I wanted to meet my son that never really kind of got to meet my son. We have some photos. I'll do a little mix in of another story. Right here in the same room, dancing with my son, my wife takes a photo of me. And then above me in the photo is this bright light with a spiral tail. Nothing to shine like that. It's at night. She used the flash. We did a lot of like what happened over here. So there was a bit of a charge here with something. Maybe either my friend John Bearclaw, who we call Bearclaw, either my friend Bearclaw or my grandmother kind of sticking around a little bit to say, hey, I am watching him. I'm watching him play while you do play with your records, and he's playing with his toys. And here I am. Don't forget to, I'm here to watch out for him. I'm here watching you. So that photo of me and my son, I'm sitting here rocking him, or I'm feeding him or something. And then that shine of light and all that. So that all kind of took place in this little area right over here behind me. So that was, it wasn't frightening. It was more comforting. And I feel like I have that. I have a lot of, I guess you want to call them angels or spirits or souls that have attached themselves to me, or that I do feel watched over in a sense more than I do feel haunted by my grandmother, or my friend Bearclaw. I feel like I'm more watched and looked after for a little bit. And I almost don't feel their presence anymore. So, and that was probably about 12 years ago. So I do feel like they've passed on and they're not around so much, but I do feel that they did stick around for a little bit.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. Oh yeah, cool. Man.
Do you think maybe also why you didn't feel like fear or apprehension was because you kind of on another level knew like, oh, this isn't weird or uncanny. This is something, it isn't something to be afraid of. It's something, it's a nice message.
I didn't feel like it was malicious, R2 flying across the room, and hitting the wall behind me. Different story. I would have been, I grew up Catholic, but I'm not sure I have a cross handy in this house, but I've watched enough Ghost Adventures where I see Zach Baggin, yell out and say, leave me alone. You're not wanted here. So, I mean, I've actually done that before, said some stuff out loud when feeling icky or something,
I still, even having been raised with, that story and some other stuff that has happened, always have my, in case of emergency, crucifix lying around just in case I need one. I know where it's at. Like it's quick, I don't have to search for it. I know exactly where it's at just in case.
Come on, I just watched From Dusk Till Dawn. Anything can be a crucifix, right? As they say in the movie there. So there you go. Just get like a wood and your shotgun and you're good to go.
Yeah.
How about you, Jack? Anything you care to share in this regard?
Yeah, I have two. I'll if we have time, I'll give the second one. This I think will relate to Gabe's. I had a longtime roommate in Florida, and she moved to New York, and then I moved. So we were in I lived in the same apartment complex. When she moved, I moved into a single unit. We were in a 2-bedroom. So I moved like literally one door over. I was 2907, and then I moved to 2909, the single. And all the time that I was like, a kind of a nice benefit to living in apartment complexes is you kind of feel like they're not very haunted. You know, like houses, like people die in them, but like apartment complexes are so transitory. You know, you feel like it's just not sticky for ghosts. So like we never had anything in our apartment, but when I was in the other one, when I was in the single, like there was just this constant kind of creepy feeling. You know, the feeling like you're being watched, you're not alone in a room. I would have that all the time, and I would also have crazy dreams. I would have long, weird, strange dreams, like one after another after another. Here's one that I remember. Um, uh, Mulder and Scully were like on some sort of like Japanese cooking show, and it was about like cooking with, you were supposed to make something like the hottest thing you could make, and these people were making burritos, and one person was making a burrito, and they put this really hot Scotch bonnet in it, and Mulder and Scully are narrating while this is happening, and they're like, he's laid in the Scotch bonnet, and then he fills it with a bunch of cheese, and Scully's like, no, 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 that was a mistake. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He lays in a bunch of rice. And she's like, no, 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 that was a mistake, because the rice is going to absorb the hot, you know, in the mouth. And if you use something like cheese instead, you know, it'll just bleed into it and make it a hotter experience. And like, so I would go from a dream like that to another one equally just insane. And then I would wake up exhausted. And then also like, what the fuck about rice and cheese? Like, and then I had a friend stay with me, and like a friend from out of town, and she stayed the night, and she woke up and she's like, I had the weirdest dreams. And I was like, it's this place. There's just something wacky about it. So I had this, I lived in I had a neighbor, a person who would become my neighbor. I would go visit her. She lived far in another complex, not too far away. And I would always sort of like hang out at her house and kind of like drag my feet leaving, because I just did not want to go back to my apartment because it was spooky ooky. And I also hated going into it when it was dark, because I was like, I'm going to see a ghost. I just know it. So I would hang out with her and I'd tell her about these things. And in particular, one night I had a dream. So this is a dream. In my dream, I'm washing dishes. And I'm thinking, oh, wouldn't it be crazy if I turned around and there was someone behind me? And I turn around and there's someone fucking behind me. And I jump and I scream like a girl. And again, in the dream. And then the person behind me just collapses to the floor, goes a little fetal, and just starts moaning. And I look at them, and then I see like on their head, they have like just this like little trail of blood. And instantly in the dream, I was like, oh, this dude's dead and he doesn't know it. And then I wake up from that dream and I was like, that's who's in the house. So I go to my friend's house. Her name's Carolyn. Shout out, Carolyn. And I tell her, like, I'm just so creeped out. And then I tell her this dream I had. And she was a smoker. She looked at me, she goes, you got a motherfucking ghost. So the story doesn't go anywhere from here. I never actually saw the ghost. He never materialized. I continued to have crazy dreams. Eventually, I moved out of that complex, and then everything kind of dissipated. But I do have like a little coda. Like, I also went through like a real serious depression. Like, I was in a kind of a job that was making me miserable. I was really unhappy. My friend that had moved, I felt like she was my best friend, and I felt really, like she was, in another city, and I felt really like just dislocated from her. I had a tooth go bad, and it went bad like over the weekend, and there's really nothing I could do. So I remember I would draw a hot bath, and I would just sit in the bath and soak in the hot water and hold my teeth, and just miserable. Like your 20s, I don't know, not everybody, but your 20s generally suck. Or, can be prone to lows. So I think what actually happened was like I was going through a depression, and I think sometimes depression can kind of like there's internalized depression when you're sort of like in touch with your feelings, but I think sometimes like depression can kind of feel externalized. And I think that's what like a large category of hauntings are, because you talk to people and you dig at these stories, and I think like your mom, you dig at these stories and like, oh, I was scared. I was alone. I was in unfamiliar territory. All the things that were there to comfort me weren't there, and all these things were happening that slightly ambiguous but feel menacing. And I think like that's depression. So
Yeah.
I think looking back, my haunting isn't a real ghost. I think my haunting was just my depression sort of externalizing itself, which isn't to say that I don't believe in ghosts. Or I don't know, I love ghost stories, and I feel like every now and then I'll hear one and think, well, there's no explanation for that. There's no explanation for what that can be. But then I also, on the other side of it, think like, man, when I die, I don't want to like hang out, getting pulled into Ouija boards. I got shit to do. I don't want to. I don't want to. Let me go.
Well,
What about you,
if it's
Danny?
depression, my depression did something really wacky once that I'll share with you. It's a quick little story. It's not too in depth, but my parents got divorced. So flash forward to where I'm like a teenager, angsty. I was totally into paranormal stuff. So I was like reading about ghosts and demons and exorcisms and all that stuff. This is while I was going to Catholic school. So I was like very much, like living a life of contradiction, like going to church every day and then like reading about ghosts at night. So I bought this big book, encyclopedia of paranormal activities type stuff, and it had everything in there from like A to Z, aliens to like devil to ghosts, everything. And shared it with my friends. We would like read it and be like, oh my god, that's such a creepy story. Had it for a few months, put it in my room, kind of forgot about it. One day decided to pull it back out, and all of the pages in the book, no joke, were all blank. Not like faded, not like you could see where like words used to once were, like completely blank, like you could flip through it, nothing. And this is a book that was like this thick. It was like an encyclopedia.
Mhm.
And so that freaked me out. I was like, that's really weird. Like I know that there was stuff in it that I didn't buy a blank book because I read the information and I shared it with my friends and we looked at it and it was a whole thing. So that was part, one of this scary room in this house that like was kind of spooky. My dad started seeing shadow people at night, and I shared it on our last podcast,
Mhm.
so I won't go into the depth of that. But he was seeing shadow people at the same time that this was going on. So my dad's girlfriend had lived with us, and because I lived with my dad only part-time, she used my closet as her extra closet for her clothes. So she had clothes in my room, and I had my clothes, but there was it was so big that she had clothes in there as well. So we sort of shared my closet. And so she would sometimes go in my room to get her clothes and then and come out. So one day I went in and went in my room, woke up, as it was on the weekend, and woke up, started going about my day. And she said, you need to make your bed. And I was like, okay, whatever. Went in and did like the lazy teenager thing where I just like didn't make the sheets. I just put like the comforter on top and like kind of made it look nice, and without really like doing the work. Went back in my room later in the day, and I saw that she put her clothes out for the night, and I saw, like, I don't know, a blouse and some slacks or whatever that she put on the bed. So I knew she was in the room. Went back at the end of the night to go to sleep, and literally like everything in my bed was like thrown into the corner. So it was like my pillows, the comforter, the sheets, everything except for the mattress was like bare. It was just like a bare mattress. And I immediately thought, this bitch got mad that I didn't make the bed, and looked at the comforter and got mad and pulled the sheets. And I was like, and I'm gonna have to make the bed now. And it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm tired, and how dare she do this? And so I like made the bed and put the comforter back on it, went to sleep, kind of didn't think about it. Next day, I was like, why did you do that? That was like really rude. Like, don't do that to my room. Like, you don't have a right to like pull my blanket blankets and all my sheets and stuff and kind of like gave her an attitude. And she was like, I didn't do that. Like, I wouldn't do that. And so I was like, kind of like, okay, half believing her, half didn't believe her. But I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. So then a couple days later, again, I go to bed, comforters pulled off the bed, the sheets there, but there's an indentation of like where someone has like slept. So at that point, I'm like, this is kind of weird. Like, I don't know if she's doing it to scare me, but at that point, I like was really freaked out. Then I finally like like told my dad like what was going on, and he admitted to me that like he had a priest come and bless the house like multiple times because he was seeing these shadows people. So like at this point, like I believe that our house was haunted. I never saw a ghost, but this was like my side of what was going on. Like my dad was experiencing something like completely different altogether. This is like the stuff that like happened to me that is kind of unexplainable. We eventually moved out of that house and my dad stopped seeing shadow people. My blankets in my bed was never messed with again. But yeah, uh, I have no explanation about it. So it was kind of one of those weird things. And I wish I would have kept the book because I could have kept that as proof, but I have no idea what happened to the book. You would think that I would have kept it and like shown it to people and be like, oh, look at this paranormal ghost book. But I think I threw it away or did something.
I would have taken it to Barnes and Noble and got my money back. I'd have been like, what's with you guys? Sold me an empty book.
I know, right?
So that was happening concurrently with your dad seeing the shadow people.
Yeah, the things with my dad and the shadow people happened for years. He never told me until like I got older, because he didn't want to scare me. But that stuff kind of happened. There was one other incident where me and my brother were home alone, and we're watching TV in our we had like a den or like a TV room where we would like congregate to watch TV. We were watching TV, just me and my brother. My brother's like 6 years older than me. I was like around 13, and we heard a big crash in our kitchen, like if someone had like 20 pots and pans and like threw them on the ground, like this huge crash. And we were so scared that we climbed out of the window because we didn't want to go see what it was. Because we were that frightened about, we didn't have, that good feeling that it was like my grandmother visiting or something. Like it was like a malicious, horrible feeling. If it was my grandmother, we probably still would have done the same thing because she was an evil woman. But we climbed out of the window and waited for my dad. And when my dad got home, there was nothing there. There was nothing, no like pots on the floor. Nothing had like nothing disheveled or like nothing was out of place. But we both heard this like loud banging, and those were the only things that I ever experienced, outside of what my like firsthand experience in our haunted house that my dad had.
Now, it's interesting when you say you and your brother heard the same thing at the same time, and did you guys talk about it, or did you just like look at each other and just leave?
Yeah, so my brother like literally he's like notoriously a chicken, like he's super scared of everything. So he like jumped up and like landed behind me. Me being like the younger brother, like you would think he'd want to protect me, but he was like, every man for himself. So he like jumped away, and yeah, and then we climbed out of the window because we were so scared, like we needed to wait for our dad to come home and check and see what was going on. And um never knew what happened.
Interesting.
Your brother is going to leave a 1-star podcast review.
I never call him a chicken.
I'm just sharing with the world that he's a chicken and he's scared of everything. Yeah. He got my dad, like us being Latino, like we love being scared and love scaring each other. My dad got a life-size cutout of a man once and put it in my brother's room. So when my brother opened up the door, he saw a man standing there and he fainted. And that's how chicken my brother is, and that's how much my dad loves scaring us. So yeah, that was a family treat.
Oh no! Now I have to switch sides and say it sounds like your brother, like he was traumatized. He's not chicken.
He's not chicken. He's just traumatized. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we, as much as like we were scared, we still loved it. It's like watching scary movies where your adrenaline comes up. When I was a little kid, and when I was like 5 or 6, one of my favorite things for my parents to do is they would turn off all the lights, and then my dad would start making like monster noises, and my mom would like push her hair forward, like I mean,
Like
now like the
Ring.
the girl from The Ring. Back then we didn't know what that was, but like she would like try to make herself look like a scary witch, and we would freak out and like run around the house screaming, and like we loved it even though we were like super scared. Like that was like one of our favorite things to do. So it's kind of a weird like dichotomy of like, yeah, we maybe lived in a scary house, but like at the same time we kind of liked it, but at the same time we were terrified.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Which is what we're going to get into in just a moment about the horror genre and films. But I just want to share one brief story real quick, and well, maybe two. At the Whaley House in Old Town San Diego, it's haunted. I think I talked about this before. It's like probably one of the most actively haunted houses in the country or whatnot. And my wife and I and there were taking a tour. It was my first time. I think both of our first times in there. And we're just going around and we go upstairs to one of the bedrooms. And you can't go into the bedroom. They have like a glass partition, but you can step in a little bit to look around in it. And then we both just leave. We didn't say anything. We just both left that room because, well, for me, I just started feeling uncomfortable. And we both go downstairs. We read this sign description about the room. I guess one of the owners or someone had died in there of like a heart attack or something with his chest, right? So whatever it was, when we get outside and we sit down, it's like, why did we leave that room? And then my wife says, I started feeling this pressure on my chest and I couldn't breathe. And I was like, I felt the same exact thing. And we didn't talk about it up there while it happened. It was just afterwards outside. And it was just this weird, uncomfortable feeling in that room. Now, is that enough to make me believe in ghosts? Not really, because I rationalize it in my head that, the guy died of a heart attack. Maybe I felt, or something, whatever he died of, the symptoms were similar to what I was feeling. So I said, okay, it's just my mind playing tricks on me. They have a cemetery also in Old Town, which is like one of the first cemeteries in San Diego, and it's claimed to be haunted. It's a small little thing. It's two streets align it. It's like probably maybe 20 different burial sites in there. But we were just touring it one night, late night there for whatever reason, and out of the corner of our eyes, we see like a shadow figure. No one else was in this cemetery with us. It was just a shadow of a man there, and we look over and it was gone. Now that was a little more on the freaky, menacing side that you guys are talking about because it didn't feel like it was there to welcome us at all. It felt like it was there to, I don't know, just do something malicious, and it was it was a little more on the freaky side. That one, still not enough to make me believe in ghosts. I want to believe. I like the idea of it because it makes for a lot of creative stories. And maybe unless like one of my light posts behind me falls down right now by a ghost, maybe then I'll believe. I don't know, but it's I want to believe in life after death just for that instance because like you said, you don't want to stick around when you die, but maybe I do. I want to go mess with someone. I want to go push some things over and just make people question their sanity because that'd be kind of fun. Um, but that's just me.
Well, I was
Uh,
going to ask you, like, if you saw a shadow person, what would it actually take for you to believe in ghosts? Like, do they have to like shake you and like convince you?
walk
Like,
up to me and say, "Hi, I'm a ghost."
yeah, like if you saw a shadow person, like that's pretty definitive, no?
You would think so, but I don't. I don't know. And my wife gets mad at me all the time because I say I don't believe in it. Even after what we've seen, I still don't believe in it. So I don't know what it would take. I mean,
Is
I
it
don't
like a
know.
self-protection? Like if you don't believe it, that then it's you're not scared because
It could very well be that because that's when we talk about horror movies, I for the longest time didn't watch any because they didn't scare me.
Hmm.
And it was like, why bother? I'm not going to get scared. And that when we get into this topic now of scary movies and whatnot, it's why do humans or us, why do we like horror movies? Why do we like being scared? What is it about us inherently that we chase or seek out that thrill? And so I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that, why we look for the fright before we get into more of the general horror movie stuff. What do you guys think?
I can I go?
Yeah.
I have someone explained this to me about obsessive compulsive disorder. They're like, nobody likes the part which is, did I leave the stove on? Did I leave the stove on? Did I leave the stove on? But the absolute bliss you feel when you go and you look and the stove is off, like that is the thing that they're chasing. Like it's that little shot of like, oh, I did lock the door. I did da da da. And I think in the same way, I think like, look, we all have anxieties and fears and in just normal daily life, you know, they're not the big things, you know, like werewolves, you know, you know, the minor mundane anxieties of life.
Yeah.
And I think like in a horror story, your anxiety in particular it's like a balloon is being filled with air. And at a certain point, you know, like, oh, this keeps happening. That balloon is going to pop. And then it's a tension of waiting for the balloon to pop.
Yeah.
Then eventually the balloon does pop. And then after the story is over, there's a kind of like, there's a come down. So I think that there's this process in which on the one hand, you get your fears are being sort of like pulled to the front, but then they get dispersed and then you can kind of like calm down. And I think that is I think it's like roller coaster junkies. Like, of course, you're chasing the adrenaline, but then at the end, you're like, I lived.
Yeah.
So that's my theory. My theory is that like I think there's catharsis at the end.
Yeah, it's sort of like that forbidden fruit kind of a thing, like where you know your instincts are always to like protect yourself and like there's that aversion to danger, but when you watch a scary movie you can kind of live vicariously through like the final girl or like the final character that lives, of like being chased by Freddy Krueger and then you know surviving, and like you're like, oh my god, like that adventure that you know you just had by watching that is like such a thrill. That definitely is for me because I do have anxiety, and you would think that like I would not like watching scary movies because like why bring anxiety like further into my life? But I love that feeling of like being scared and then feeling okay, and like at the end of it you're like, oh, it's a happy ending. Like it just makes you feel like I could watch a scary movie and then go to bed like you know right after. It's not like something that I need to do during the day, but yeah, I have to agree. It's that like chase of the thrill in the moment.
I want to feel that uncomfortable. What movie makes me the most uncomfortable? Which one's going to make me squirm the most? I like being forced to squirm, I guess. I don't know. It's just something about like the movie Hereditary and movies like that are just like, oh my God, this movie is just all horrible feeling the entire time, you know, or, you know, everybody died. That was so bloody or something, you know, it's like, I guess I'm enjoying that more. I didn't as a kid or even in my teens or 20s. I think more just recently in the past 10 years or so, I've gotten more into it. I think the more experiences that I have with the paranormal, the more I watch about it, or the more that like I've watched any paranormal thing on HBO Max right now that I can stream. I've watched it. I've checked it out, you know. So I don't know. It's kind of more new for me, but I think it is that feeling of, I like the uncomfortable stuff. I don't know. Do I want to admit that I like the stuff that's like torturous and all that? I don't know. I don't know if I want to mention that here if you're going to post this. But yeah, I don't know. I just like that icky part. Ooh, man, this is getting really bad, you know. You know, I don't know. It's just
I'm with you on it's a recent uptick for me in those type of films. And I think it's been more for me because I really enjoy seeing people's creative take on these different genres, especially when it comes to like the slasher movies. I never until a couple years ago, I never saw the original Halloween, never saw the original Friday the 13th. And now I'm going back and I'm watching them and I'm like, yeah, they're not scary, but it's just fun to see how these people can get creative, especially with their era of filmmaking and how they the special effects, and I was more practical effects then than it is now. And it's just it was really creative and I really enjoy watching those filmmakers master their own craft. And even if it's just the B movies too, that it's just fun. It's just something to distract me. Maybe even real life is more frightening than the films for me. I don't know. It's just something that I've really been enjoying recently. So I'm right there with you in that. And the ick is something that I can see myself just settling, like just getting uncomfortable, and it's feeling the tensions rise, like you said, Jack. Especially this isn't a horror film or a horror genre, but the episode Fishes from The Bear, and I'm not sure if you guys seen that. It's like their Christmas episode, but they're sitting around a dining room table, and there's this tension building about whether or not John Berthnall is going to fight the other guy, and then Kath. Oh goodness, what's her name? The original Scream Queen, who's in the Bear. Jamie Lee Curtis, thank you. And she's just off her rocker in that episode, and it's just the whole tension that builds up. And I would like to chase that because that's sitting in that is quite interesting.
Yeah, for me, I love like a haunted house movie, like any movies that like revolve around like a family being tortured by a ghost. Like I'm all about it. Like I love like old Victorian houses, like in real life. Like I have like gone to so many to see if I can find a ghost or like I don't know. It's something like I love like Wuthering Heights, the book. Like anything that's like sort of gothic and like tortured souls that need to be set free like is sort of I don't know appealing to me. Not necessarily like demons in the house, but like more ghosts that are like trapped that need to be set free, and then you can set them free and have a happy ending at the end. Like I'm all about that. I love those type of stories.
I just read an essay about Lovecraft and cosmic horror, and in it was sort of like talking about like I think there's a real fascinating connection with cosmic horror, which is Lovecraft kind of starts writing these stories and building up the genre around the same time that we start discovering black holes, and then like you get this like oh hey the cosmos like the universe is very big and there are these huge forces in the universe that like make earth and our petty lives seem very insignificant like like uh we so much of our planet is based around
Yeah.
the sun, the solar energy, and oh black holes are bigger than suns and can swallow so and then the main thrust of Lovecraft is petty humans are insignificant in the face of these larger elder gods. And it's a real, it's a kind of a depressing way, to look at the world. So, but the person who was writing the essay was like, he's listing like these are all the little components that make up a cosmic horror story, and one of them is that the man's insignificance in the face of the universe. And then they're like, but the next thing is these are really fun stories. They're ultimately like at the end of the day, it's a big buster with a bunch of eyeballs and tentacles, and that is fun. And the fun, like for as dark as the material is, and the sort of like based in a kind of like a very existential sense of dread, the stories are delightful. Like they're fun romps. And I think that that's a kind of like just because something is dark or gory or heavy doesn't mean that it can't also, like what's that phrase, whistling past the graveyard, there's a real connection between like horror and comedy, and I think like fun, like I think chasing that thrill of like it's a very small, just a very small little tiny piece of what death is like. That you can sort of like have a little bit of a sense of control around, and that is it's a kind of a high.
Yeah, that's true. Do you guys have a favorite horror genre, whether it be like slasher films or a traditional vampire, witches, werewolf, zombie, anything like that? Do you guys have a favorite genre?
I would say anything with vampires, I think, is number one. Lost Boys being one of my favorite movies of all time. Bram Stoker's Dracula as well. Blade, stuff like that. Just, I mean, if it's got a vampire, I'm most likely I'm gonna enjoy it.
So you watched all 7 Twilights.
I have not watched all 7 Twilights.
Vampire.
You know what? I have watched maybe the first one I've watched, but I have not watched the whole thing. But yeah, most of the time, you know, and I guess I didn't mind it, you know, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't enough for me to like, I got to invest, you know, 14 more hours in this or however long the rest is, you know, but, and I haven't seen every vampire thing out there, but man, I remember as a kid, I was like, "Oh, I like Dracula." I was Dracula a couple times growing up as a little boy. Just something mysterious about him.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I love a vampire story. I have been a vampire so many times for Halloween, and when I found like the fangs that you could put on that like look real, like, oh, I love that.
You mean candy corn?
Yeah, no, like the actual fangs that like you put like polydent, so like it's like a denture, like you just put them on your canines, and everyone thinks that it looks real. At least it did back in the day. But I don't really find like I'm not scared of vampires or Dracula. Like I always feel like if I saw a real vampire, I'd like rush to them and be like, hey, can I be a vampire too? Like especially like there's one particular scene that in Bram Stoker Dracula with Keanu Reeves and Dracula's brides, where I was like, I'll volunteer to like be a vampire. Like it's not scary at all. Like I was like, I'll be right there in a moment. So, but my favorite genre is, like I said, is haunted houses. Like The Conjuring is one of my favorite films. Amityville Horror, like family escaping the haunted house is perfect for me.
Yeah, paranormal comes in second, real close second.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that genre.
How about you, Jack?
I'm a big fan of what they call weird fiction. So I would say Hereditary. If you take the first like hour and a half of that movie, because at the end of the day, like it's a possession story, but you don't really get that until the last like 20 minutes. But the first hour and a half, all the stuff is happening, but you don't really know what it is, and it doesn't make sense, and it's not you know, a thing that I love in that movie in particular, because I think a thing that defines weird fiction or eerie stories is its mood versus, you know, it's about a sense of being unsettled and feeling dread versus like, oh, there's a monster chasing you or there's a killer. And mood is like, I think something that movie does so well is like there will be scenes that are completely benign. A person is going to sleep or they're just sitting in their room, and the camera lingers in this way where you think like something gonna have something moving. Is there something in like the shadows there? And that's all, you know, that's all kind of what you're projecting onto it. It's not really, you know, the movie's being ambiguous. And I think that like my favorite feeling after a horror movie, like, you know, you go to the movies, you're on the drive home and you're just creeped out, is that sense of like reality is a little off kilter now. And I think like anything that can give you that feeling, I love it.
That's a good point. I never thought about it like that. The mood of the horror film. That's I would say probably my favorite as well. That's, you know, just where nothing's really, you're not really seeing anything, but like you said, you're projecting what you want there to be there. And yeah, that's my favorite as well. Absolutely. Because then I get to use my imagination and create a whole bunch of different things. So absolutely.
It's the idea behind Jaws. What you imagine is so much better, or Alien. What you imagine is so much creepier, scarier, more horrific than what they can actually show. So let you do the work rather than, you know, some poor beleaguered special effects team.
As a writer, Jack, do you think can you portray that in your work and let the reader do that, you know, the work for you? How do you accomplish something like that?
Well, a thing that I discuss a lot with I think like horror comics are a big genre in comics, and I know a bunch of horror comic writers, and one of the things that they I think like a challenge that every horror comic writer has is movies come with soundtracks, and soundtracks do so much of the like actual heavy lifting. I think like recently I saw The Shining, the Stanley Kubrick movie, in the theater. And what I've never gotten from watching it on TV was just sort of like the sound. It has a great score, which you notice right away because it's so creepy and weird. But when you hear it, like it's so louder in a theater and so much more elevated. And so much of that movie is really informed by like just that fucking creepy soundtrack. And I think like a real problem not a problem in comics, but a real limitation in comics is you don't get music cues, which are really like if you're trying to make like that extended sense of scene, it can be really hard. But I think that's the challenge. Like what makes great stuff is always sort of like what your limitations are, what your challenges are, and how you overcome them or how you overcompensate for them. So I think in every type of writing, whether it's horror or not, what you're always trying to do is a couple of things. You're always trying to make an emotional connection. You want the other person reading it to feel whatever it is you're trying to convey. And then I think you're also trying to say, like, this is how I see the world. And I want you to see this little piece of the world the way I saw it. And that, like, those are your tools. That's how if you can use your tools to get those two effects, then everything is possible. You can get that feeling in a person I mean, it is hard to get a person to close a comic book and be like, oh God, I'm unsettled for the rest of the night. But I'm reading one right now that is doing such an amazing job. If I could give a small plug, I don't know if you guys are fond of Charles Burns. He did Black Hole. He's a kind of more of an indie guy than a big DC guy, but he just put a book out called Final Cut. And it's super creepy, and it's mood after mood after mood. It's really fun.
Nice. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. If I can interject real quick, Jack, you might be stumbled onto something. You know how greeting cards, when you open them up, they play sound? So why can't you incorporate that into your comic books? Each time you turn a page, the mood, it triggers like the little sound effect or something that you want to give to your audience.
No, at the end of every book, I post a soundtrack.
Yeah.
I think people think like, oh, this is mood music you're listening to when you create it. But no, I want you to cue these, like, because I'm not fully insane. I don't say, and at 2 minutes and 16 seconds in, please play this part of this song. But I just sort of like, hey, if you make a playlist, or I have a playlist on Spotify, if you listen to this while you're reading it, you'll get the full experience.
Awesome. That's cool.
That's a really great idea. You should copyright that before I steal it.
No, I think I didn't. I don't know if you guys read Scud, the Disposable Assassin, but what he would do at the end of the book is he would assign voices. Like John Malkovich is the main character, and so. So I think I pulled the idea from that. And hey, it's free domain. Everybody make your comics, make your comic soundtracks.
That's cool. That way you can kind of get a voice of who the main characters sounds like. Yeah, that's kind of cool. That's interesting. Well, as we dive into this month, we're going to be talking about each episode. We're going to talk about more in depth about the different horror genres. I think the next one's going to be about vampires. So we're going to dive more in depth. And then we're going to talk about Gabe's favorite, zombies. And then, we're going to talk about witches, which I'm really excited to because I've been watching a lot of Agatha all along. So witches is all going to be there. Then we're going to get into, I think, Gabe's also second favorite. We're going to get into like the more demonic, and possession type stories and how that all relates into pop culture. So if you guys are watching this right now, make sure you tune back in and stick around because we are going to get very in depth here. And I think if you notice in some of the editing in this, you'll see that maybe a little bit more stylistic just as we go along these. So you guys have any parting thoughts you'd like to share? Anything, any plugs you want to shout out to?
Can I? It's not my stuff, but since it's Halloween, there's a fantastic book called Dwellings, which, if you look at it, is sort of animated, like, or not animated, drawn like old Harvey comics, like Casper and Richie Rich and stuff like that. But they tell these like really gruesome little stories. So it's kind of a switcheroo, like you think it's going to be the sort of like they're calling it, I think, cozy horror. which is a fun thing. And then a really great companion to that, I think one of the best comics that came out last year was Beyond the Trees, which was
I think, yeah.
beneath the trees and nobody sees. Is that the one?
Thank you. What a terrible blur. Did you read it, Adrian?
I have not. No, I it's hard to get your hands on it. It was a little smaller run and got really popular with some really valuable exclusives, hard to get exclusives and all that type of stuff. But yeah. No, I wish. I mean, I'll wait till it gets released to the library or collected or something like that, and I'll sit down and read that one.
So the collection just came out, I think just last week or maybe the week before. So it's available. It'll probably hit library soon. But it is also drawn. It's drawn like there's sort of these animals. Like remember the Richard Scarry books? Like the town and mayor and blah blah blah. So it's drawn in that style, kind of watercolory like those, but it's about a serial killer. Okay. Just a little aside, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, in those old books, there used to be this little bug called Goldbug, and you're supposed to hunt around and see if you could find him on the page. It was like, where's Waldo? And so I was like, oh, I wonder if he went that far and he put a little Goldbug. So I'm scanning the page to seeing if I can find it. And then there was this like very anatomically appropriate, really gruesome dismemberment scene. Like, you know what, Goldbug?
No Goldbug there.
But they're both out. They're both like sort of very surprising and disarming because they look so cute, but then are like real rough. But the story, they're not just sort of shock value. Like the story in Beneath the Trees is fantastic. As is Dwellings. Dwellings is more like an anthology. There's a series of short stories, but they're really great. So those plus Charles Burns' Final Cut. That's your spoopy season reading playlist.
There you go. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate that.
I have a book recommendation. It's called Monstrilio. It's by Gerardo Semano Cordova. He's from Mexico City. It's my book for October. It's also sort of in the horror genre. I definitely recommend it for anyone that would like to read it along with me. I just started it, but it's definitely got some moments that are very make you feel queasy, kind of uneasy. So for people that are fans of like Hereditary or like those kind of films that make you feel a little uneasy, this book is like right up there along with that thematically. So definitely check it out. Plus, I love the subgenre of horror books written by Latinos. I think there's like a little additional like spice that we add that from our culture that really lends itself to horror fiction. So I definitely recommend it. Go pick it up.
Very cool.
That's in my queue at the from the digital library.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, as soon if I get it within the next couple of weeks, I'll ping you and we can read along.
Nice. Yeah, for sure.
That's cool. See, I like this PopCultX book club. I think we need to get it going even more. I like it. Well, very cool. Adrian, anything you want to add?
No, I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's always a blast coming on here. Appreciate you having me here.
At your background, Adrian, just to make sure that I don't see anything spooky. Like
there's nothing behind me. That's funny. Gen X and I were on a call not too long ago, and I have these lights on my house, and it's the under the awning lights, and every now and then they'll go light and dark. They'll get brighter and dimmer. And he was like, "Man, just right behind you." Right outside that window, if you could see the window that's just right here on my door, and he's like, something's flashing over there, and I was like, yeah, it's my lights. It's fine. They dim and brighten and whatever. So
it's funny you say that, Gabe, because I'll do that to all three of you guys to make sure nothing happens.
Just like a random hand coming out.
Yeah, just
awesome. Well, Jack, Adrian, Gabe, thanks for coming on the show tonight. We appreciate it. And everyone out there, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. And we will see you guys all next time.